She hadn't meant to stop that morning. Didn't need lamp oil, didn't need tobacco, didn't need thread or sugar or salt. Truth was, she hardly needed anything at all anymore. But the horse slowed on its own, nose tossing toward the town square, and Evelyn Boone let the reins slacken. Something in the air felt different that day, the kind of shift you only noticed if you'd been carrying silence in your chest for years. That was when she saw them. 3 children. Their heads covered in coarse burlap sacks, rope knotted tight under their chins, their hands bound behind their backs, standing still in the dust beside a crooked sign scrawled in tar black paint. Orphans, $2 each, no names, no questions. Evelyn's breath caught sharp in her throat. She hadn't planned on stepping down from the wagon, didn't plan on standing in the center of the square where the merchants hawked their bread and beans, where the sheriff leaned lazy against his post, where the town women whispered behind gloved fingers. But her boots struck the dirt anyway. Each step hit like a hammer, steady, certain, uninvited. The auctioneer, a red-faced man with crooked teeth and a vest that strained against his belly, turned toward her with a nervous smile. "Well now," he said, licking his lips, "you here for one?" Evelyn didn't answer. She only watched the 3 children. One swayed slightly, the tallest, maybe 11, maybe 12. His knees bent like he might drop, but he caught himself, stiffening again. The other 2, smaller, thinner, stood still as shadows. The man cleared his throat. $2 apiece. Good deal. Don't cry. Don't talk much either. Course, they ain't trained. Seller said keep the sacks on till they're gone. Less fuss that way. Still Evelyn said nothing. He shifted uncomfortably. Could be mute, could be worse. You don't know what you're buying, is all I'm saying. The crowd chuckled, low and cruel. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and pulled free a small leather purse. Inside was what little she had left, $6 silver and a folded slip of paper that smelled faintly of sage. She pressed the coins into his greasy hand. "All 3, she said. The man blinked. "Beg pardon?" "Untie them." The square went still, heads turned, nobody dared breathe. The auctioneer hesitated, muttering under his breath as he flicked open a knife. One by one he cut the rope binding each sack. The first fell away to reveal the eldest boy's face, sunken cheeks, pale blue eyes too wide for his frame. His jaw was tight, but he didn't flinch. The second, shorter, with a scab splitting his lip and a bruise blooming under his eye. His gaze darted from face to face, never landing, never trusting. The last, the smallest, no older than 6, lifted his chin and stared straight at Evelyn Boone. Through the dust, through the noise, through the years of silence that had caged her heart. Then in a voice soft as water on stone, he whispered, "Mrs. Boone." Not loud, not afraid, just certain. The crowd rustled like wheat in wind. Someone coughed. A woman muttered, "How does he know her?" Evelyn's jaw clenched. She stepped forward, placed a hand gently on the child's shoulder, then touched the middle one, then the eldest. "Come with me." The auctioneer sputtered, "Ma'am, you don't even know their—" But she didn't stop. She didn't need their names. She only needed them alive. They rode in silence. The wagon wheels groaned against the rutted road, and the children sat in the back, clutching their knees, eyes fixed on the horizon. Evelyn didn't ask questions, didn't offer bread or water. Not yet. Comfort given too quick was a dangerous thing. It frightened children who'd been starved of it too long. Her homestead sat on the edge of a hollow where the pines grew tall and the creek ran fast. The barn leaned tired against the wind. The fields had gone to seed, and the windows hadn't seen soap in months, but it was hers. When the wagon stopped, the eldest boy climbed down first, steadying the others without a word. They followed Evelyn inside like shadows trailing a lantern flame. The stove still held morning heat. Evelyn set a kettle on, pulled flour and beans from the cupboard. "Sit," she said. They obeyed, quiet as mice. She stirred batter with one hand, her eyes never leaving theirs. "What's your name?" she asked the smallest. He hesitated. "Jonah." She nodded. "And yours?" The middle boy lowered his head. "Eli." The eldest met her gaze, unflinching. "Caleb." Evelyn slid the pan onto the stove, batter hissing. "I'm Evelyn. You said my name, Jonah. How'd you know it?" The boy shrugged. "Just knew." "Did someone tell you about me?" "No." "Have we met before?" He shook his head. "Then how?" Jonah scratched at his wrist, his voice barely a whisper. "A lady told me while I was sleeping. She said, 'Evelyn Boone will come. She'll take you home.'" The batter sizzled. Caleb stiffened. Eli's eyes dropped to the floor. Evelyn didn't move. "What lady?" She didn't say her name, but she was kind, warm, like you. The room fell silent. Caleb's jaw tightened. I don't care how he knew you, he said flatly. If you're going to hurt us, do it quick. Don't drag it out. Evelyn turned the pancakes. I won't hurt you. They all say that. Well, she said, setting the plate on the table, I won't say it again. They ate like wolves. No words, no thanks, just the scrape of forks and the clink of tin mugs. When the plates were bare, Evelyn laid blankets near the hearth. You'll sleep here tonight, she said. Clean clothes are in the chest. If you run, I won't come after you, but I'll leave the lantern lit till morning. She turned toward the stairs, then paused. Tomorrow, she said softly, we'll talk about what comes next. But none of them slept that night, and neither did she. Because Jonah's words echoed through her chest, louder than the wind outside, louder than the creak of the rafters. Words she had whispered once before, down on her knees beside her husband's grave. Let someone need me again. Let someone speak my name. And now a boy had. And 3 lives, maybe 4, were about to change forever. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of sky that seemed to press down on the earth itself. Evelyn Boone had barely closed her eyes, but she was already dressed and downstairs before the rooster crowed. The boys were still near the hearth, tangled in their blankets. Jonah was curled small, a thumb hovering near his lip but not quite in his mouth. Eli lay rigid on his back, fists balled tight against his chest. Caleb sat upright in the far corner, knees drawn, his eyes fixed on the door as though he expected it to fly open any moment. Evelyn didn't speak. She set a kettle on the stove, poured water into a basin, rolled up her sleeves, soap foamed between her hands. You can wash in the barn, she said finally, her voice steady but not sharp. There's privacy there, towels in the red box. Caleb, you go first. Eli second. Jonah, you last. Don't come back in till you're clean. The eldest narrowed his eyes. Why? Because I want you to. People don't do things just to be kind, Caleb muttered. Evelyn met his stare. That's because people forget how much kindness costs. He held her gaze for a long moment, jaw tight, then rose. Without another word, he took the bundle of clothes she'd laid out and slipped out the back door. By the time Eli followed, she was already slicing apples, stirring oats into a pot, sprinkling in the cinnamon she had saved for years, waiting for a day that mattered. Jonah lingered in the doorway. His shoulders looked too small for his shirt. Can I keep my name? He asked. Evelyn turned. Why wouldn't you? People change them if they take you in. She shook her head. I won't. Good, Jonah whispered, 'cause I think God gave it to me. Something in Evelyn's chest cracked, just slightly. She nodded toward the barn. Go on now. Don't let the others use up all the hot water. By mid-morning, the boys returned. Caleb was the last, his dark hair damp, shirt too big but clean. He didn't sit. He stood at the table, arms crossed. I'll do chores, he said flatly. You don't need to. I want to. That changed something. Evelyn led him outside, showed him the shed with its tools half rusted, the chicken coop leaning lopsided, the garden patch overgrown with weeds. Caleb didn't ask questions. He just nodded and set to work. Eli she sent to stack firewood. Jonah trailed after her, helping fold linens, sweep the floors, carrying dishes with both hands as if they might vanish if he didn't hold them tight. The day wasn't smooth. Eli flinched whenever Evelyn's shadow crossed his shoulder. Jonah dropped a plate when she snapped too quickly about the mud on his boots. Caleb worked past noon without stopping, refusing bread when she offered. But by sundown there was warmth in the cabin, a kind that hadn't lived there in years. And then came the knock. 3 short raps on the door. Evelyn froze. The boys stiffened, eyes darting. She opened it a crack and found Reverend Abram Stokes on the porch, tall, thin, his black coat wet with the drizzle. His hands were folded like he was already praying. Afternoon, Evelyn, he said. Heard you made a purchase in town. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. I brought them home. His brow furrowed. Wasn't sure it was you. Some folks said you'd gone mad. Maybe I have. They're not livestock, Evelyn. They've been passed from one home to another more times than I can count. That Caleb boy, he broke a man's jaw once with a horseshoe. You know what you're dealing with? I know. You want me to register them with the county clerk? Make it official? Not yet, she said firmly. I need to know they'll stay. I wouldn't count on that, not with their history. Evelyn looked out at the pines, then back at him. Then I'll make new history. For a moment his stern mouth almost softened. You always were stubborn. I learned from the best. He tipped his hat and turned away. I hope you know what you're doing, Evelyn Boone. 3 boys at once. That's near a resurrection. She didn't answer. Behind the curtain, Jonah peeked out. Who was that? Just someone who worries too much. He's scared, Jonah whispered. So am I, she said quietly. That night, Evelyn pulled out her late husband's Bible. She set it on the table, the boys watching from their blankets. I read from this when I was your age, she said. Sometimes it helped, sometimes it didn't, but I thought maybe you'd want to hear a little. They didn't answer, so she read anyway. He setteth the solitary in families. He bringeth out those which are bound with chains. She didn't look up, just turned the page, her voice steady as the fire popped and hissed. By the time she closed it, Jonah was asleep against the bench, Eli curled under a blanket, and Caleb, though his eyes stayed open, wasn't watching the door anymore. He was watching her. Evelyn blew out the lantern. For the first time in years, the silence of the house didn't feel empty. The next morning there was blood in the snow. Not much, just a thin trail leading from the back of the house into the pines. Evelyn's heart thudded as she followed it. The boys were still inside. She hadn't woken them. Not yet. The prints wound down a ravine, past the fence line, into a thicket of dark trees. That's where she found him. Caleb, kneeling beside a snare trap, his hand wrapped in a rag, face pale but expression blank. A rabbit twisted in the loop, half dead, bleeding. I didn't mean to, he muttered. Wanted to bring breakfast. Thought I could. It fought me. He didn't cry, didn't flinch, just stared at the rabbit, then at her. Will it die? Yes, she said. I'm sorry. Evelyn crouched beside him, ended the animal's pain quick with a stone. She wrapped it in cloth, then unwrapped his hand. You'll need stitches. I've had worse. Maybe so, but not here, not anymore. Back at the cabin, she stitched him by lamplight while Eli and Jonah watched from the table. Caleb didn't blink, didn't wince. I want to learn to trap right, he said. You will. And shoot. Her brow arched. Why? So I can protect them. He nodded toward the others. Her throat tightened. All right, but not today. That night when he lay down, Caleb didn't curl into the corner facing the wall. He faced the room, faced them, faced her. And when Evelyn finally let sleep take her, she whispered into the dark, "Thank you." She didn't say to whom. She didn't need to. It was the scream that woke her. Not a cry, not a whimper, a raw, tearing scream that split the walls. She bolted upright, heart pounding, and rushed down the hall. Caleb's body thrashed on the cot, drenched in sweat, sheets twisted around his legs. His fists clawed the air. Jonah sat frozen beside him, hands over his ears. Eli stood rigid at the window. "Caleb!" Evelyn shouted. "Wake up!" He didn't. His lips moved, broken words spilling out between screams. "Stop, please stop. No more, don't." Evelyn didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees beside him, gripped his shoulders. "It's not real, Caleb. You're safe. You're home." His eyes snapped open, his whole body jerked stiff. Then he gasped, a ragged sound, and recoiled so hard he nearly fell from the bed. "Don't touch me!" "It's Evelyn," she said calmly, her hands raised. "You were dreaming." His chest heaved, his gaze darted around the room like he didn't know it. Sweat streaked down his temples. "I'm sorry," he muttered, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to wake anyone. I didn't mean—" Eli stepped forward, pale but steady. "He does this sometimes, not always this bad." "I'll sleep in the barn," Caleb said hoarsely. "I'll be quiet. I swear I'll be quiet." "No one's going to the barn," Evelyn said. "You're staying here." He lowered his hand slowly. "I scared him," he whispered, glancing toward Jonah. "It's okay," Jonah said, wiping his eyes. Caleb swallowed. "I dreamed he was back. The man who bought us before. I don't remember his name. Just his boots. Always smelled like rope. I thought I was back there." "You're not," Evelyn said firmly. "I know," Caleb whispered, "but it felt like I was." They sat in silence, the wind scratching against the roof. Finally Evelyn stood. "Come," she said. "We'll make tea." Jonah blinked. "Tea?" "It helps," she said. "Reminds us where we are." So they followed her into the kitchen, where she lit the lantern and set the kettle. Each boy chose his mug. Jonah picked the one with blue flowers, Eli the plain gray, Caleb the dented tin cup. They sat sipping in silence until the edge of dawn, the rooster crowing weak outside. None of them slept again. But when the sun broke through, the crow didn't sound lonely anymore. By mid-morning, Caleb was already outside, splitting wood beneath the pale winter sun. The axe looked too big in his hands, but he swung with sharp focus, every strike ringing against the quiet valley. Evelyn stood at the porch, arms folded against the cold. She had shown him the right way, grip steady, feet apart, blade true, and he had absorbed each word like scripture. He hadn't missed once. "You'll wear yourself out," she called. "That's the idea," he answered, breath rising in white clouds. Inside, Eli stacked the firewood he had carried from the yard. He moved carefully, setting each log like it might break if handled wrong. He didn't talk much, but there was gentleness in the way he worked, gentleness that made Evelyn's chest ache. When he found a worm in the kindling, he held it carefully between two fingers, carried it outside, and placed it back in the earth. Then he returned, silent as ever, and kept working. Jonah had claimed the broom. The handle was taller than he was, but he dragged it across the floor in neat little lines, humming under his breath, a hymn, broken and incomplete. "This little light of mine." The words were faint, not even full verses, just fragments, remembered pieces. Evelyn found herself humming it later, stirring bread dough before she even realized it. 3 days passed, then 4, then a week. The cabin began to change. The silence no longer felt heavy, it felt warm. Eli started reading aloud from a book he had found on the shelf. He stumbled over words longer than 3 syllables, but Jonah clapped for him anyway. Caleb stopped asking for chores, he simply did them. Evelyn caught him one morning repairing a hinge on the barn door with a nail he had scavenged. "Who showed you how?" she asked. "You did," he said simply, "when you fixed the gate latch." Jonah, too, had found his way of speaking. Every few days, Evelyn discovered a drawing tucked into her pillow, crude crayon sketches of a crooked house with smoke rising from the chimney, stick figures standing in front, always 4 of them, always with the word home written in the corner. It wasn't perfect, not by any measure. One night, Eli returned with a black eye, the swelling raw and new. Evelyn saw it the moment he walked through the door. "What happened?" "Nothing. Don't lie to me." He dropped his gaze. "Town boys said we were trash, called Caleb names. I told them to stop. They didn't." "Did Caleb fight back?" "No, he just stood there." "Why didn't you run?" Eli shrugged. "We don't run anymore." Evelyn knelt, touched his chin gently. "Let me see." He tilted his head, his eye dark and bruised. "You're brave," she said. "Foolish, too. Sometimes those are the same thing." That night she made stew thicker than usual, set extra bread on the table. The fire burned hotter. Caleb didn't speak much, but she noticed him sliding the last slice onto Eli's plate when he thought no one was watching. 2 mornings later, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, the ink sharp and formal, the seal of the county stamped in the corner. Evelyn read it twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her apron. After breakfast, she sat the boys down at the table. "They've asked us to come into town," she said. "Why?" Caleb's voice was low, wary. "They want to ask questions, about how you're living, about me, make sure I'm fit." Jonah's face paled. "We don't want to go." "You don't have to stay," Evelyn said gently, "but you do have to come with me. You have to show them what we've built here." Caleb rose slowly, his shoulders tight. "And if they try to take us?" "They won't. Not if we show them who you really are, not the things people said about you before, not the stories they passed around like rumors, but the truth, what we've become together." No one spoke for a long while. Then Eli gave a small nod. "All right." The ride into town was long and quiet. The boys sat stiff in the wagon, their eyes never leaving the dirt road. When the courthouse came into view, brick and towering, like some sermon carved from stone, their silence deepened. Inside, the air smelled of ink and varnish. The clerk, a man with spectacles perched on the edge of his nose, looked at them with a mixture of suspicion and boredom. He asked his questions one by one. "Do you sleep through the night? Do you get meals? Do you feel safe?" Each boy answered, calm, clear. Jonah's voice trembled once, but Evelyn placed her hand on his shoulder and he repeated himself stronger. "Yes." The clerk leaned back in his chair. "You're lucky," he said. "She could have left you where you were. Not many would take in 3. Not after what we've seen." "She didn't take us in," Caleb said suddenly. The man blinked. "She did. She bought you." "No," Caleb lifted his chin. "We chose her." That night, when they returned, Evelyn found another drawing under her pillow. This one had 4 stick figures holding hands. A crooked little house stood behind them, a plume of smoke curling from the chimney. Overhead, stars dotted the sky. On the roof, scrawled in shaky crayon, was one word: found. For the first time since burying her husband, Evelyn Boone cried. She didn't hide it. She didn't excuse herself. She sat at the table with the boys close around her, and she wept. They didn't ask why. They didn't move away. They just stayed. The first snow came early. It swept down from the mountains in fine lace, covering the valley in a blanket of white. By morning, the hills had vanished. The pines bowed heavy. The creek slowed to silence. Jonah pressed his nose to the window pane, fogging it with his breath. His mouth hung open in wonder. "Is it cold?" he asked. "Freezing," Caleb said without looking up. "Can I touch it?" "You can touch it all you want, but don't go out without boots. Your toes will snap like twigs." Jonah laughed, though he didn't know if his brother was joking. Evelyn smiled and turned back to the stove. "Breakfast," she called. "Hot biscuits, but only if you set the table right." Eli rose first, dutiful as always. Caleb stretched his long arms and followed. Jonah scampered behind, still glancing at the window. They ate in silence, the kind that had grown familiar, no longer heavy, but comfortable, a silence of understanding. Evelyn found herself watching them longer than she meant to. "Why are you looking at us like that?" Caleb asked finally, a biscuit halfway to his mouth. "I'm just proud," she said quietly. The boys paused. Jonah reached across the table and took her hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That afternoon, they built a snowman in the yard. Jonah insisted it needed arms and a hat. Eli fetched sticks and an old tin lid. Caleb grumbled, but he laughed when Jonah threatened to give the snowman his coat. Evelyn stood on the porch with a mug of tea, watching them tumble through the snow, their laughter rising sharp and clear into the cold air. It had been years, long years, since she had heard that kind of sound, since her husband's voice had joined it, since she had dared believe it might return. Now it had, and it wasn't noise, it was life. By sundown, the sky burned gold over the white hills. The boys came in soaked and beaming. They peeled off their clothes, hung them near the fire, and sat tangled in blankets while Evelyn ladled out stew. Caleb brought out a deck of cards. "Who wants to lose tonight?" "You always cheat," Eli muttered. "You always lose," Caleb shot back. Jonah giggled. "Same thing." They played 3 rounds before sleep claimed them, their limbs a tangle on the floor. Evelyn draped an extra blanket over their pile of bodies and sat awake by the stove, her tea cooling beside her. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. But inside, the cabin held warm. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Boone felt she wasn't alone. The trouble began 5 days later. Evelyn had gone into town alone for supplies, leaving the boys to mend the chicken coop after a raccoon's midnight raid. It was supposed to be a short trip. But when she reached the general store, Gerald Wash, the owner, a man usually too busy stacking flour to look anyone in the eye, paused and scratched at his neck. "You best hurry home," he muttered. Evelyn frowned. "Why?" Ryder came through asking questions about the boys. Her hand stilled on the counter. "What kind of questions?" "The kind you don't want strangers asking. Said he had papers. Said he was family." Her gut clenched tight. "Name?" "Didn't give one. Rode east." East, toward her land. Evelyn didn't wait. She left the flour on the counter, climbed into her wagon, and snapped the reins hard. The horse lunged, snow flying from its hooves. Her heart hammered louder than the wheels. When she crested the hill, the cabin came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney. The boys were inside. But another horse was tied outside the porch. Dark, saddlebags heavy. And in that instant, Evelyn Boone knew the life she had fought to stitch back together was about to be torn at the seams. The door creaked when Evelyn stepped inside. The boys were lined up against the far wall, their faces pale, eyes wide. Caleb stood in front, chin lifted like a shield. Eli beside him with fists clenched, Jonah pressed against the stove, trembling. And between them and the door stood a stranger. Tall, pale, a black coat buttoned to the collar, his mustache curled at the edges like a villain in a dime novel. In one hand, a folder. In the other, worse, a burlap sack. The kind that had once covered the boys' heads. Evelyn's breath sharpened. "Step away from them." The man turned slowly, eyes cold. "You must be the widow Boone." "I am." He tilted his head. "You've got something that belongs to me. They're not yours." "Oh, but they are." He opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "Ward transfers. Judge Hammond signed them 2 counties over. Paid good coin for these boys." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She had heard the name Hammond, an old judge retired years ago. "Those papers are forged." He smiled thin. "Doesn't matter. Folks see a seal, they don't ask questions, and I've got the seal." Caleb stepped forward. His voice shook, but his eyes burned. "You say that again, I'll knock your teeth out." The man chuckled. Brave little dog, aren't you? But dogs bite. They get put down. Eli moved to stand beside his brother. Then maybe we bite. Jonah whimpered, clutching Evelyn's skirt. She placed a steady hand on his shoulder, then lifted her eyes to the man. You'll leave now, she said. He raised his brow. And if I don't? Evelyn didn't hesitate. She strode to the mantel, lifted the rifle that had belonged to her late husband, and leveled it square at his chest. The room went still. The man's smirk faltered, but only slightly. You wouldn't. I would, she said. Her voice didn't waver. I'm scared, but fear don't mean my finger won't pull this trigger. For the first time he hesitated. His hand twitched, then lowered. Slowly he slipped the papers back into the folder. You'll regret this, he said. You think you can hide them? You think a piece of dirt like this can keep the world out? They always come back. They always do. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Then let them. They'll find us standing together. The man's face hardened. He backed toward the door, fastened the sack to his saddle, and mounted his horse. You'll pay, he called as he rode off, his voice trailing with the snow. They'll take everything from you. Evelyn didn't lower the rifle until the sound of hooves was gone. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. That night none of them slept. The fire burned low, but they sat close, Caleb with the rifle across his lap, Eli's hand resting on Jonah's shoulder. Jonah pressed against Evelyn's side. They'll come back, Caleb said flatly. Maybe, Evelyn admitted, but next time we'll be ready. Eli shook his head. They think we're weak. Let them think it, Evelyn said. It makes it easier to surprise them. For the first time, Caleb laughed, a dry, sharp sound, but it was laughter all the same. The next morning, Evelyn hitched the wagon. We're going to town. All three boys froze. Not for supplies, she said, for truth. They rode together, past the snow-laden pines, into the brick shadow of the courthouse. Judge Tomlin, a man with spectacles and tired eyes, looked up from his desk when Evelyn dropped the forged papers in front of him. I didn't sign these, he muttered. Hammond retired years ago. Then someone is stealing children with your name, Evelyn said coldly. The judge's face paled. He straightened his spectacles. We'll handle this. You have my word. I don't want promises, she said. I want peace. Behind her, Jonah piped up softly. We just want home. The judge looked at the boy, then at Evelyn. Finally, he nodded. You'll have protection. If there's forgery, we'll find it. Whoever's behind this will answer. Evelyn tipped her hat slightly, turned, and led the boys out. Her arm rested firm around Jonah's shoulders all the way back. Winter pressed harder, the nights grew longer, the wind rattled the shutters and slipped through cracks in the walls. But inside the cabin grew stronger. Caleb built a sled from scrap wood. Eli learned to carve. Jonah practiced his letters on chalkboards Evelyn had dug from the attic. His first word wasn't cat or dog, it was Evelyn. He scrawled it on the wall one morning, his R backward, his N crooked, but proud all the same. When she saw it, Evelyn wept quietly into her apron. They planted a small winter garden, cabbage and hardy greens. Caleb repaired the fence. Eli mended a chair. Jonah drew pictures of chickens that looked more like clouds with legs. Piece by piece, they stitched themselves into a family. But peace, like all things in that valley, did not last long. The first warning came at dusk, slipped under the door, a folded note written in careful penmanship. You stole them. That won't be forgotten. Evelyn burned it in the fire before the boys could see. The second warning came a week later, a chicken missing, then a goat found dead, its neck snapped. Caleb buried it before Jonah could stumble upon the carcass. I think it was wolves, Eli muttered. Wolves don't snap necks and leave the body whole, Caleb replied. His eyes narrowed toward the tree line. Someone sending a message. Evelyn said nothing, but that night she oiled the rifle and loaded every chamber. The boys' laughter still filled the cabin, but shadows hung heavier now. Caleb trained longer with the axe. Eli grew sharper, eyes always flicking toward the window. Jonah began sleeping with a lantern burning beside his bed. And Evelyn Boone lay awake long after the fire died, staring at the rafters, whispering a prayer she wasn't sure anyone was listening to. Don't let them take these boys, not again. The storm arrived on Caleb's birthday. Thunder rolled across the mountains, shaking the shutters. Rain pelted the roof in sheets. The cabin glowed with every candle Evelyn could find. They made a cake from what little sugar was left. Jonah carved a whistle for Caleb from a branch. Eli stitched a pouch for nails and tools. Evelyn gave him a coat, her late husband's, dark wool, fine stitching. Caleb touched the sleeve like it was fire. I can't take this, he whispered. You already have, she said. He wore it the next morning without another word. That was the day everything changed. A dog appeared at the edge of the tree line. Yellow-eyed, ribs showing, fur matted. Jonah spotted it first through the window. "Dog!" he cried, tugging Evelyn's sleeve. She stepped beside him, squinting, not a good sign. Before she could stop him, Caleb had already gone outside. "Come back in," she shouted through the window. "I just want to see," he called back. The dog froze, stared, and bolted into the trees. Then the gunfire rang. One shot, then silence, then three more. Caleb dropped flat into the snow. Eli yanked Jonah from the window. Evelyn froze in the doorway, every muscle tight. That sound, she knew it. Warning shots, then proof, then silence again. Not wolves, not thieves. Hunters. And they were closing in. That night, they didn't light the fire. They sat in the kitchen, eating cold beans, the rifle on Caleb's lap, Evelyn's revolver on the table. "Do you think they'll come in the dark?" Eli whispered. "No," Evelyn said. "Cowards wait for daylight." Jonah shivered. Evelyn pulled him close, her arm around his shoulders. "They'll come," Caleb said, "but we'll be ready." No one argued. Outside, the snow fell silent and steady, burying the trail. But Evelyn Boone knew. Snow couldn't bury everything. Not fear. Not memory. And not the footsteps of men who wanted what she refused to give. For 3 days, they stayed shuttered in the cabin. Snow piled high against the door, wind howling like wolves outside. The fire stayed cold. Too risky, Evelyn said. Smoke meant signal. Signal meant trouble. Food dwindled. They ate bread so stale Jonah had to dip it in water just to chew. By the 4th day, Evelyn knew it couldn't last. "I have to ride out," she said. All 3 boys snapped their heads toward her. "Into town?" Caleb asked. "Beyond. There's a church homestead 2 valleys over. They take in families. If I leave tonight, I can reach Pastor Whitlow by morning. He'll send word. He'll help us." "No," Caleb said flatly. "Too dangerous. If they find us here without help, it'll be worse." "I'll go," he said quickly. "I'm faster." "You're a boy." "So?" "They're hunting boys." Caleb's mouth closed. His jaw set hard, but he didn't argue. Evelyn softened her tone. "I need someone to stay and keep the others safe. If I don't come back in 2 days, then you leave. Follow the map. Don't wait longer." Jonah's voice cracked. "Don't leave us." She knelt, cupped his cheek. "I'll be back, I promise." But promises were fragile things in those mountains. She left at dusk, the revolver strapped to her side, a satchel of jerky and bread tied to the saddle, a folded map tucked in her coat pocket. The snow bit at her face, the wind clawed her shawl, but she didn't slow. By sunrise, she was 10 miles out when she heard it, hoofbeats. 3 riders fanned across the ridge, scarves over their faces, guns drawn. The leader spurred forward, circling her like a wolf. "Where you headed, miss?" "Church," she said evenly. "Not that it's your business." "Oh, it is," he sneered. "You've been harboring 3 strays that belonged to men who paid for 'em. They weren't bought, they were dumped. Paid or dumped, it's all the same. Then maybe the law is broken." The man chuckled dark. "You're awful brave for someone surrounded." "I've got enough lead to fill all 3 of you," she said, raising her revolver. He whistled sharp. 4 more riders stepped from the tree line. 7 in all. Evelyn didn't lower her gun, but her hands trembled. "If you take me," she said, "you'll have to drag me." "You won't need to walk," the leader said, and swung his pistol. The blow cracked against her temple. The snow swallowed her as she fell. Back at the cabin, time dragged heavy. 1 day. 2. By the 3rd, Caleb couldn't sit still. He paced the cabin, fists clenched, eyes sharp. "She wouldn't leave us," he said. "She might have been delayed," Eli answered carefully. "Storm, horse lame, anything." "No, something happened." He pulled the box from beneath the bed, the revolver Evelyn had left, a knife, the folded map with routes scribbled in her hand. "We're going after her," Caleb said. "You can't," Eli whispered. "We can't stay, not if she's out there." Jonah stood, voice soft but certain. "I'm coming too." "You're too small." "I don't care, she's my mom." The word fell heavy in the cabin. None of them had spoken it before. Caleb looked at him, at Eli, at the fireless hearth. His chest rose and fell like he was swallowing a storm. "Pack what you can carry," he said finally. "We leave at first light." The snow groaned beneath their boots. Caleb led, revolver at his hip, map tucked under his coat. Eli walked behind, checking over his shoulder every few steps. Jonah trudged between them, his stride short but steady, the crude slingshot Evelyn had carved for him strapped across his chest. They moved quiet as shadows, the valley stretched wide, the air thin and sharp. At the halfway mark, they found her horse. Its chest was torn with bullet holes, its body stiff in the snow. Blood stained the ground, a trail dragging east. Jonah's voice wavered but didn't break. "She's alive." "How do you know?" Eli whispered. "I just do." Caleb clenched his jaw. "Then we follow." The trail wound into the hills, the pines thick as prison bars. They climbed until their lungs burned, until the snow thinned and the earth turned slick. That was when Eli spotted it, a boot print in the mud, narrow with a drag behind it. "A woman's step," he muttered, weak but fresh. Caleb knelt, touched the mark. His lips moved soundless, prayer, curse, or both. "We're close." The shack appeared sudden, half hidden in the trees, weather-beaten, leaning crooked, smoke curled faint from its chimney. A red scarf hung from a nail on the porch, torn, familiar. "She's in there," Jonah whispered. "No guarantee," Eli said. "Could be a trap." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "We can't wait." They crept forward. Boards groaned under Caleb's boots. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. He pushed. The hinges wailed. Light spilled into a room stinking of sweat and smoke. A table overturned. Rope coiled on the floor. And in the corner, Evelyn. Her wrists tied raw, her cheek purpled with bruise, her eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. But when she saw them, she smiled. "I knew you'd come." Caleb was at her side in an instant, cutting the rope with trembling hands. "Did they hurt you?" "Not in the way they wanted." Eli checked the window. "No sign of them." "They'll be back," Evelyn rasped. "They left for supplies. They've got buyers waiting. Boys like you fetch coin." Jonah's voice rose from the doorway. "They're coming." He was supposed to stay back, but he stood there now, clutching a rock, his eyes wide. 3 men, trail behind. "Help me up," Evelyn whispered. Caleb slung her arm over his shoulder. "We're not leaving you." They stumbled through the back door, down into a ravine. Snow slipped beneath their boots. Gunfire cracked behind them, splintering bark, spraying dirt. "Run!" Caleb shouted. Eli fired once over his shoulder. 1 man fell, the others scattered. "They'll circle us," Caleb said. "We can't outrun bullets." "There's a mine shaft east," Evelyn gasped. "Abandoned. My husband used to trap there. If it's standing, it'll buy us time." "Then that's where we go." The shaft yawned open like a black mouth in the hillside. They slipped inside, lantern light flickering weak against damp walls. Rusted rails ran along the floor. Old carts rotted in the shadows. "Farther in," Caleb whispered. "We'll make a stand." Jonah's voice shook. "What if it caves in?" "Then we risk it," Caleb said, "because outside is worse." The echo of boots came minutes later, voices low, angry. "I told you they were here." "They won't get far. This place is a coffin." Caleb pressed his back to the wall, revolver in hand. He passed Evelyn a knife. "You shoot if they get close, no questions." She stared at him, startled. "Caleb." "I won't let them take us." The first man passed the bend. Caleb struck fast, the butt of the revolver cracking against his skull. The second spun, gun raised, but Eli leapt, knife flashing. The third lifted his pistol, then fell with a shot ringing down the tunnel. Evelyn stood at the entrance, smoke curling from her revolver. Her hands shook, her breath hitched. I didn't think I could." "You did," Caleb said, steadying her arm. "You saved us." But the fight wasn't finished. A groan rose from the ground. The last man wasn't dead. Blood streaked his face as he reached for his weapon. "Please," he rasped. "I was just doing a job." Evelyn stepped forward, kicked the pistol from his grip, and leaned close, her voice cut like steel. "You tell whoever sent you, if they come near my boys again, I'll put the next bullet between their eyes." She straightened. "Now crawl." They left him groaning in the dirt. And when they slipped from the mine's side shaft hours later, dawn was breaking pale and cold. They didn't speak until the cabin was in sight again. "Only then," Jonah whispered, voice soft but certain, "we brought her home." The hills were quiet when they returned. The snow had melted into heavy mud, and the air carried the faint smell of pine sap and smoke. The cabin stood crooked as ever, but to Evelyn Boone it looked like the safest fortress in all creation. They didn't speak much that first day. Evelyn stitched her wounds in silence while Caleb and Eli cleaned the revolvers, reloaded, and stowed them within reach. Jonah clung to her side so closely she half wondered if he would ever let go. That night, the four of them huddled near the fire. No one touched their stew, no one dared close their eyes. But when sleep finally claimed them, it came heavy, dreamless, like a storm breaking. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly the fear ebbed. Caleb began chopping wood again, though his grip had steadied, his shoulders stronger. Eli returned to carving, his fingers tracing smooth edges into scraps of pine. Jonah practiced letters with chalk on a slate until the house filled with crooked words. Jonah, Eli, Caleb, Evelyn. The cabin no longer echoed with silence. It hummed with voices, with chores, with life. And though the threat outside still lingered, shadows in the pines, whispers in the town, Evelyn felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. The first sign of spring came with the tree. They had planted it on a rise near the old mine shaft, a small sapling fragile against the cold. For months, Evelyn doubted it would survive. Then one morning Jonah burst through the door, barefoot and shouting, "It's got flowers!" She followed him up the hill, the boys at her side. The tree stood barely shoulder high, its thin branches quivering in the breeze. White blossoms bloomed along the twigs, fragile things, trembling, but alive. "Told you it would grow," Caleb muttered. Eli smirked. "You said it would die in the first freeze." "Shut up." Evelyn laughed. The sound startled her. It had been so long since it came without effort. The boys turned to look at her. Jonah reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. For the first time in years, Evelyn Boone felt her heart unburden. But peace never stayed forever in those valleys. One evening, 3 heavy knocks shook the door. Caleb reached the rifle before she did, his jaw tight. Eli slid to the window, peeled the curtain back. "Ryder," he whispered, "alone." Evelyn placed a hand on Caleb's arm. "Let me." She opened the door. The rider wasn't a man at all. He was a boy, barely older than Caleb, hat too big for his head, boots worn to the sole. His horse swayed with exhaustion. In his hand, a crumpled telegram. "You Evelyn Boone?" he asked. "I am." He handed her the slip. Message said urgent, rode all night. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. 3 boys taken, southbound wagon, headed for auction, need help, see. Her blood ran cold. "See?" she whispered. Caleb stiffened. Eli's eyes narrowed. Jonah pressed close against her side. Evelyn knew the truth. There were others. The boys had once spoken of the network. Children shuffled like cattle across counties, sold to the highest bidder. Some escaped, some didn't. A few stayed behind to fight. C was one of those. And if he sent word, it meant more children were in chains. "I'll ride," Caleb said instantly. "No," Evelyn said. "I can fight." "I know, but I'm not sending my boys into hell. You can't go alone." "I won't ask you to let me," she said firmly. "I'm telling you, those children are out there, and if I don't ride, who will?" Eli swallowed. "Then we ride with you." Evelyn looked at them, 3 pairs of eyes, fierce and unyielding. Jonah's lip trembled, but he didn't back down. She nodded once. "Saddle the horses." By dawn, they were already across the ridge. Rain chased them down the valley, the river swollen with spring melt. They crossed at the shallow bend where the rocks turned red with clay, their boots slick with mud. At a trading post, Evelyn pressed the keeper for news. 3 boys came through, the man said finally. Bound, 1 limped bad, wagon broken axle, headed south to Porter's Mill. Porter's Mill, a lawless place, home to gamblers, drifters, and men who bought things not meant for sale. They rode without sleep. By nightfall, they reached the ridge overlooking the valley. Tents sprawled along the creek, lanterns flickered, men with rifles patrolled. In the center, a pen of crates and wire. Inside, 3 children huddled. One clutched his stomach, another still wore a sack tied around his neck. Jonah's small hand gripped Evelyn's. "We have to." "We will," she said. They waited until midnight. Evelyn slipped down first, walking steady as if she belonged among the campfires. A woman in a world of men, daring them to question her. None did. She reached the pen. The children blinked, too afraid to speak. She raised a finger to her lips, cut the wire with Eli's knife, and pulled them through. At that same moment, Caleb charged from the far side of camp on horseback, rifle raised. Gunfire split the night. Eli lit the fuse on a stick of dynamite he had kept hidden since winter. The blast cracked like thunder, scattering men, toppling tents, throwing shadows wild against the trees. Evelyn gathered the boys, shouting above the roar, "Run!" They tore through the chaos, the rescued children stumbling. Caleb riding flank, Eli covering the rear. Jonah clung to Evelyn's arm, refusing to let go. They didn't stop until the valley lights vanished behind them. By dawn, they reached the hill where the blossom tree stood. The children collapsed beneath it, too weak to speak. Evelyn wrapped them in blankets. Jonah pressed a canteen to the youngest's lips. Caleb sat with the rifle across his knees. Eli leaned against the trunk, carving a small cross from wood. "We saved them," Jonah whispered. Evelyn looked at the blossoms overhead, white against the gray sky. She nodded. "We did." But she knew it wasn't the end. A week later, C arrived. He rode a mule, hat wide enough to shadow his face. His eyes were sharp, but his smile was real. "You got my message," he said. Evelyn nodded. He handed her a ledger, worn and heavy. Names, ages, destinations, too many to count. "There are more," he said. "Too many." Evelyn looked at the boys, at Caleb sharpening a blade, Eli steady with his carvings, Jonah clutching a rescued child's hand. Her voice was steady. "Then we keep going. Them and us, together." C smiled faintly. "Welcome to the fight." The years passed, the cabin grew, more children filled its halls, some came bruised, some came silent, none stayed that way for long. Evelyn never turned a child away. In time, the house became known by another name. The Boone Light. Because that was what it had become, a lantern in the dark for the lost, for the forgotten, for the children the world had tried to bury. And for a widowed woman who had once whispered into the dirt of her husband's grave, "Let someone need me again." Her prayer had been answered, not just once, but 100 times over. And so ends this story from Stories Untold. If you believe more people should hear tales of courage, love, and hope, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Stories Untold, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. Because every story, no matter how buried, deserves to be told.